Welcome to the Contagion podcast, where we spread inspiration one story at a time. I am your host, Holly Jean Jackson. Each episode spotlights and interviews one transformational leader, their stories, and their advice for how you too can lead yourself and others through inspiration. If you are a visionary seeking to uplevel your leadership skills, then this is the podcast for you. I invite you today to spread inspiration like a contagion. Welcome to the Inspiration Contagion movement. All right, welcome to episode 25 of the Inspiration Contagion podcast. This week's episode is also being recorded for YouTube, so if you'd prefer to watch today instead, please take a look at the show notes for that link. Welcoming and joining our guest this week, JJ Virgin. JJ is a prominent TV and media personality whose previous features include co-host of TLC's Freaky Eaters, 2 years as the on-camera nutritionist for weight loss challenges on Dr. Phil, and appearances on PBS, Dr. Oz, Rachael Ray, Access Hollywood, and The Today Show. JJ is the author of 4 New York Times bestsellers: The Virgin Diet, the Virgin Diet Cookbook, JJ Virgin's Sugar Impact Diet, and JJ Virgin's Sugar Impact Diet Cookbook. Her latest book, Warrior Mom: 7 Secrets to Bold, Brave Resilience, shows mothers everywhere how to be strong, positive leaders for their families, while exploring the inspirational lessons JJ learned as she fought for her own son's life. JJ has launched over 10 businesses, and her current endeavors include founder of the Mindshare Collaborative, the most influential community in health. She also founded her successful personal brand, JJ Virgin and Associates, as well as co-founding the Unicorn Club, a group for women entrepreneurs with 7 to 9 figure businesses. JJ also hosts 2 popular podcasts, Mindcast for health experts and entrepreneurs, and the JJ Virgin Lifestyle Show with health tips for consumers. Her most important role is as a mom of 2 budding entrepreneurial young men. And with that, welcome, JJ.
Hi.
Hi, it's so great to have you here. I've seen you speak live on stage at a lot of other events, and I love the new title of your most recent book, which is just so relevant today. But with that, why don't you just start by giving us a little bit more about your background to the audience today?
Just depends how far back you want to go, and I'm basically unemployable entrepreneur. I started out like my first business, in high school. And I remember kind of finally deciding I was going to go to get a job somewhere that lasted all of 3 months. And then I got fired for too many ideas. So I'm totally unemployable. The good news is you don't fire yourself. So I'm a big advocate of building your own business and then building multiple streams of income in that own business so that you're covered. And yes, you're right. It's interesting. I wrote that book, Warrior Mom, as with the title Miracle Mindset, which just never felt like the right title. And so a good lesson learned is you can change book titles. And it came out of doing an interview where they said, we wanted to have you because you were such a warrior mom. And I go, there is the title for that book. But as all of this stuff started to happen with the pandemic and then racial justice and everything else, it just really brought me right back to how it felt when my son was the victim of a hit and run. And, there I was as the sole provider for my family going, all right, I'm now going to be running a business bedside with my son in a coma, making sure that not only do I save his life, he's better than before. What do you need to do to show up in that way? And I think all of us right now are really being called, right, to show up in this challenging time. And that was the one thing I knew writing that book, was that we're all going to have challenging times, and it's how you show up that makes the difference.
Yeah, and today more than ever, we need a lot of warrior moms because we're working in different scenarios. We're homeschooling. We are certainly being challenged as a country and a global economy in terms of being creative and bringing that entrepreneurial spirit back into play, as lots of big companies that you would never imagine are going out of business. So that's what better title than Warrior Mom, and what better pertinent interview than having you on the show today. That's amazing.
Well, I'm glad this background is and it's so funny. I think that's a really important thing. This background of going through so many challenges in life, and I view it all as research and development. And when you really look at people who are able to navigate the challenging times, they're people who have gone through tough times, and they've developed their mindset muscle, and they learn how to just keep stepping up and realizing that, this too will pass, and I'll probably be stronger because of it if you make that decision, right?
Yeah, and that's a really key decision, is just having that determination and that resilience mindset that, yes, we need to grieve, we need to feel our emotions and process that, but let's keep moving forward, and this too shall pass. So I love that. That's really great advice and wisdom. And with that, I also wanted to ask you, what makes you such an inspirational leader, or what's your secret sauce?
My secret sauce is being super coachable and having amazing mentors. And the first one was someone who I found, she was a client of mine when I had a personal training business in my late 20s. And I remember walking down the beach with her, and I was in graduate school. I was at University of Miami studying sports medicine, and she was my client, and she was a self-made multimillionaire. And I'm walking down the beach with her, and she's like, says, "So what are you going to do when you graduate?" First of all, she goes, "Why are you in grad school?" And I go, "Well, I want to be more successful. I want to be able to help more people." And she goes, "Oh, okay. What are you going to do when you graduate?" I said, "Well, I'm going to go get my PhD." She goes, "Why are you going to do that?" I go, "I want to be more successful. I want to be able to help more people." And I hadn't ever considered that there was any other path but just to keep going to school. Now, what's crazy is I knew her story, and her story was that she was a single mom, high school graduate, living in a trailer park, became a multimillionaire. I don't know why I'm like, I know her story, but I'm telling her what I'm going to do, because this is what you have to do if you want to be successful. And, she said, if you want to make money, you don't have to do that. And I go, this is not about the money. I remember saying this to her. This is not about the money. I really want to help as many people as possible, and this is what I need to do that. And she's like, okay. At 30, you're going to start to shift that mindset. Now, she totally future-paced me, right? Like, she goes, at 30, you're going to start to realize that money is very important here as well, because if there's things you want to do in life, money can be an amazing tool. And I'm like, yeah, right. Okay. And at 30, she reached back out to me and sent me a videotape that talked about trading time for money and building leverage and scale. And basically, I took everything that I had, sold my business, put my stuff in that I could into a little van, drove to Florida, and moved in with her and decided I was going to learn how to be successful. And the first thing she did was put rubber bands around my wrist. And anytime I had a limiting belief, I was supposed to snap those rubber bands and say, cancel, cancel. And here I am. I have just sold my business, dropped out of my PhD program, sold or put everything, the little bit I still had left, and driven out to Florida. And now I'm sitting at her house wearing rubber bands saying, cancel, cancel. And I think, what was I thinking? But hey, I was there. So I just did it. So for 6 months, she trained me on mindset, and I was learned how to tightly control my environment, not to watch the news, not to read negative stuff, not to hang out with negative people, which meant I got to get all new friends. And an interesting thing happened during that time. I completely shifted the whole way I thought, approached life, thought what was possible. She taught me that, the only limitations were the limitations in your mind, and that we get what we expect. And it shifted everything. So much so that as I was standing in the hospital the night my son got hit, and the doctors were telling me that I had to let him die, and we made the decision to overrule the doctors, my whole thinking was, how do I help my son get to be 110%? That it was never like, can he survive, or any of the negative stuff. And so the important takeaway there is, especially now, we are surrounded by all bad news, right? It's just one bad thing after the next. And just when you think it couldn't get worse, there's the next thing. You know, we've got like what looks like a civil war. We've got a complete recession, depression. We've got this pandemic that, you know, you keep hearing like all this different information. You don't know who to believe. It's just one thing after the next. But within that, if you focused on all that, it would just be the worst thing ever. Or you could go, all right, this is the situation we're in. And now what's mine to do? And over the last 6 months, I've gotten to spend more time with my adult kids than you would ever get to spend with adult kids who like are out of there, right? Nope, they're home. And, you know, getting to really reevaluate my entire businesses and go, what do I really want to do? Being able to spend time with people that I normally wouldn't get to spend time with, because now we see Zoom as you know, a new way to connect. So, you know, there's always two sides to everything. And I just was so trained to look for possibility and what's good that it shifted everything. And I think that's something that we can all do. And it's not to say, you know, there's not bad stuff. I mean, shoot, I was staying in the hospital with the doctor telling me to let my son die. I've gone through bad stuff that's super scary, where you're going to go through your periods of grief and sadness and all that. But the sooner you can get into gratitude and forgiveness and come through, the better off you're going to be, and everyone around you is going to be.
Yeah, I love that. That's so powerful. And I like the story of the physical reminder of the rubber bands on your wrists every time you had a limiting or negative thought or belief. And I feel like that's something that everyone who's listening today can do. You can put those rubber bands on your wrist, and it's a really hard time. You're probably going to be using them a lot and snapping them, right? And it's really about, like you just said, choosing the more empowering thought and the more empowering belief and shifting that back to compassion and love and gratitude and possibility. And it's so easy today for us to fall into the fear and the overwhelm and the scariness of how unknown the future is, versus, like you just said, look at the possibility and what this is opening up for you. I think that's really, really, truly inspirational. And I'm so grateful that you met that lady who taught you that early in your career.
Oh my gosh. I know. And here's what's funny. Number one, you just said a very important thing. You said what it's creating for you, which means you're not behaving like a victim, because there are no victims, only volunteers. You're creating as a victor. So that's super important. This woman, Kay Smith, became so much a part of who I was that when I went through the whole thing with my son and I wrote the book Warrior Mom, and people were going, how did you do that? And I go, I don't know. That was just in me. I'd totally forgotten the time I'd been with her. And what she taught me had become so much a part of who I was that, you know, I mean, I was faced with a situation and it was automatic to behave that way. And I think that's so key critical. And, you know, we have a tendency to go, oh, well, that's easy for you to do because of whatever, right? She always used to say, if you're saying that, it's so you can say to yourself, so I don't have to let yourself off the hook. But I did a little experiment. I didn't realize I was going to be doing this. Last year, I had the opportunity to go to a level 4 correctional facility in California. This was like a maximum security prison. And I went in with a group of business entrepreneurs to do business coaching. It was part of a program to help these inmates rehabilitate so that when they did get out of prison, they would be able to assimilate and do really well. Like, you know, a lot of times there's a very high recidivism rate when people are released from prison. And this, I think something like 90% go back. And in this program, 10% go back. So I was part of this program. I go in, I get to I get to like coach people on their business ideas, et cetera. And I really connected with one specific guy. I almost thought like, gosh, this kid should be my kid, you know? And he and I stayed in touch after that because we'd done a forgiveness exercise, and he was telling me how he couldn't possibly forgive his mom because his mom had been been on drugs when she gave birth to him. She was a drug addict. That's all he remembered of her. She always had gang members in the house. He said, I didn't have a chance. And he was so committed to that story, right, that he couldn't move forward. And I'm like, well, could you just entertain the slightest possibility of being able to forgive her? I mean, he was like, just the littlest bit. He goes, okay, just the littlest bit. So I sent him that book, Warrior Mom. And because I go through in deep detail how to really walk through forgiveness, and how forgiveness is really nothing to do with the other person and all about you. And understanding, approaching it with compassion and empathy, and realizing that the person who's in prison, metaphorically, when they're holding that grudge, is not the person that you're not forgiving, it's you. So he got it. And I didn't realize he could communicate from the correctional facility, but he reached out to me on Facebook. And once I saw that we could start communicating, I started sending him all my favorite books. I started sending him Wayne Dyer and Les Brown and Think and Grow Rich and There Is No Plan B for Your A Game, everything, right? And it's now been a year. He is unrecognizable from who he was. Now, if someone can do this in a level 4 correctional facility during a pandemic and all of the racial injustice stuff going on, and they can stay positive and focused, I mean, like, what's our excuse, right?
Yeah, that's a great story. And it's so easy, like you just shared, to get into that place of victimhood and blaming others and blaming the world and just being angry and lacking that forgiveness. And it does take a lot of ownership and responsibility to really take hold of that. And that's a beautiful story. And was that through Kat Hoke's program?
Yes.
She is amazing. I love her Hustle 2.0.
Oh my gosh. She's incredible. What a person. Like, I want to spend time around people who inspire me to be a better human being. And Kat Hoke is one of those people who's just got a life's mission on how to help people. And it makes you realize, did you do the step to the line thing with her?
Yes, I did. It's beautiful. There's no dry tears, dry eyes in the audience when you work with her.
No. Did you go to a correctional facility?
No, the timing didn't work out. I was on the list and then the timing didn't work out. And then
now it's kind of on hold for a while. But when you do step to the line in a correctional facility, it's a whole nother level.
Oh, I can only imagine. So speaking of inspirational people and inspiration, how would you define inspiration?
That's a good question.
Or what does it mean to you?
How would I define inspiration? I almost feel like we sort of have to live a bit in the gap. So, meaning that we all have the place where we are, and then we have the vision of where we want to be. And it's not saying don't be happy now, but it is saying also see the possibility of where you're going. And that means that really what you want to make sure you're doing is being around people who inspire you, who show you what's possible. So one of my close friends is a woman named Mary Morrissey. Mary Morrissey has an amazing business called Dream Builder, where she helps thousands of people learn how to really work through the law of attraction to manifest the life of their dreams, anything that they can think of. And she teaches people how to coach through this, etc. And what's crazy is Mary, when she was right around 50 years old, it was 50 years old, her then husband, she had the largest non-denominational church in the country. Her then husband embezzled $10 million from the church. And for a year, she was known as the prophet for profit in her town. Lost everything in her 50s. And at 57, started this new business that now is an amazing, massive business that does so much good out in the world. And her kids all work there with her too. She's created this incredible life that she never would have had had she been in the other one. Granted, she loved what she was doing before, but it was a very different life than what she's able to do and the people she's able to affect now. But she had to go through what she went through to do that. And the last couple months have been really challenging. And I actually had my first hit piece written about me ever. And I called her because she's like, okay, yours, I had mine for a year. I'm like, oh, and it just made me realize that if you want to go to those bigger levels and make a bigger impact, you become a target. And you have to really be so solid in who you are and why you're doing it, not for an ego-driven way, but for a sole purpose, like I am here to lead. And when you get that, you realize that, you're going to get all this stuff thrown at you, and it doesn't really matter for the, in the long run. So I look for people who've gone through challenges, who've picked themselves up, who are in it for the impact out in the world, who will continue to inspire me. Because I think it's also easy to just get to a certain point and go, well, heck, if, why bother doing that? I'll just sit over here, right? Life is comfortable. Why go do that? But that's not what we're here for.
I love this description of living in the gaps and keeping that edge and having those people that are a few steps ahead of you or that have gone through really difficult times to keep you growing and keep you dreaming and encouraged to get to that next step, because it's so easy to become numb, right? Or comfortable.
And the gap, when I mean that, I don't mean a gap of, I want a bigger house.
Right.
I'm not talking that gap. It's not the keeping up with whoever's next door. It is the gap of, you were meant for more, that like, okay, how am I supposed to really serve? What am I supposed to do here? What's the work to be done? And what's mine to do? And that's the bigger thing I've been really looking at, is like, okay, with all of these things going on, between the political, racial, economic, health, that are creating so many opportunities. And it's like, what's mine to do? Right? I think that's a great question we can all ask ourselves, is what's mine to do? How can I serve and help here the most?
Yeah. And I think that's a really key question to ask yourself, is how can you serve, and where is the biggest impact that you can make as an individual? And that really takes knowing yourself really well and what you're skilled at and where your heart is. And like you said, as you become bigger too, it's also staying firm in that foundation when people do attack you, especially in the world we live in.
Yes. And it's going to happen. It's interesting. And Mindshare, one of the things we do every year is celebrate it, because in the world of health, people get attacked as being quacks, right? I mean, all the time. And you're looking at it going, okay, first you're a quack and then you're this genius who figured out a cure for something, but in between you're a quack. And so we get all sorts of people like writing crazy emails and stuff. So we just celebrate it, because we said, hey, if you're going to get big enough, this is what's going to happen. And you celebrate it. Just realize that, hey, you got to the next level. Now you have the haters and all that. And honestly, I was sitting at a dinner. I got to do this private dinner with Deepak Chopra and I brought my mastermind. So I had a small group of the mastermind members and Deepak Chopra sitting at dinner, like one of those things where you go, okay, I love my life. Right. And we got to talk about the things that he doesn't normally talk about, and which was like, what did he really have to go through to be where he is? What are the hit pieces, attacks, the crazy stuff that he dealt with? Because that's what people will do. And then we started talking about social media, and he basically was like, social media is going to be, the downfall of civilization. And I think that's what we're seeing. I actually took all the social media apps off my phone. Just was like, yep, they're all gone.
Well, I think the reason social media is that downfall of civilization is it's so easy to get into compare and despair, and that just amplifies that gap between us, and it kills the actual genuine, authentic human connection. And it just makes us want more that isn't necessarily how we would define success for ourselves.
Right.
Yeah. And so
and don't you feel that, there's two other key points there. I think people are afraid to say things anymore because of the calling out culture. And the people feel comfortable saying things on social media to people that they would never, if they met them at a party, say. And,
Yeah.
I always look at something and go, if I was face to face with this person, would I say this to this person? Like, no. So why would you say some mean, nasty thing on social media? Like, I always look when someone does that. This is why I had to pull it off my phone. So I'll look at my social media. If someone said some mean, nasty thing on one of my, which they do, I'll go look at them. And sure enough, they're just a mean, nasty person. Like their whole thing is mean and nasty. Just like the people who send the 1-star reviews on, books, right? They 1-star review everything. I'm like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah, no, it is like, it's really hard, especially for business owners. It feels like freedom of speech is dying, especially on social media, because there is so much fear of having any kind of opinion. And there's so much attack that's
Mm-hmm.
justified for whatever reason, which I don't think is fair, but it is the
Right.
reality. And so it's kind of killing real conversation and real problem solving. So
Yeah.
those opportunities.
We want freedom of speech with responsibility.
Yeah.
If you've got freedom of speech with zero responsibility, people using pen names, hiding behind, etc., that is not okay. So that's being cowardice. It's not showing moral courage. If you are going to say something, stand for it, explain it, show who you are, but you don't need to do like being nasty and mean never fixed anything, it's like,
Exactly.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. Like if you're gonna, really, the whole idea is to come together and find new solutions and new possibilities versus let's attack each other. What's the point of that? It's not going to do anything except hurt somebody and put them down and not solve any problems, right?
Exactly.
So I wanted to ask you, because, we're talking about inspiration and success, how did you come up with a definition of success for yourself? And what is that definition?
I think success is being able to live your life with who you want to live it with, how the type of work you want to do, the type of impact you want to make. And early on, I realized that one of my biggest values, if not my biggest value, was freedom. It was really freedom to who I wanted to spend time with, what I wanted to study, how I wanted to work, where I wanted to live. And I designed my entire life. Thankfully, I lived during a time when we have laptops, and Wi-Fi. It would have been way harder 50 years ago to pull this one off. But that's how I always designed my life, so that I could live anywhere. I could spend time with people. I remember early on, I had a personal training business, and I remember firing a client who was just so shocked that I would fire her because she paid me so much. And I'm like, no, it's not. Sorry. It's like, you're fired. And it just made me make a really big decision that I would always lead from, integrity versus everything else. So that is what success is. And here's how I put it into motion. So I always wanted to design a business that I could do from anywhere, and it could impact the people I want it to impact. I could be a force for good in the world. I could figure out what's mine to do and do that. And then my son got hit, and I had to spend, I was fortunate to be able to spend the next 4.5 months with him in the ICU. And I remember being in there, I was launching my first New York Times bestselling book from the ICU next to my son in a coma. And I kept thinking, oh my gosh, what if I worked in an office? There were people there in the ICU with their kids, and they could only come after work for an hour at night. And I'm there from 6 a.m. till 9 p.m. every day. And I was just like, this is why you think you're designing that life so that you can go live in Italy. But the reality is you're designing that life so you can make, you can do those things that are the most important things ever, when they come up. So that to me is what success is. I don't look at success as much as a monetary thing, because while money buys freedom, I think what money really can do is really help create change and make a difference and be able to do things. It's like, that's more exciting than having massive houses and boats and cars, right? It's more what you can do with it. And for people that want that, totally cool. But for me, it's what it can afford me to be able to do and change, like being able to go and do the prison workshop with Kat and not think about it and just go, sure, I'll go do that. I can take time off and fly across the country and go do that. Cool. Right.
Yeah, and I love that. I love the freedom and flexibility values to build your life on for those success pillars, because that way, as you ebb and flow and grow as a human, and your maybe definition changes over time, building it on that foundation allows you so much more fluidity to have those opportunities, whether it's being with a family member that's in need and that critical time around the clock, so that you're really there and advocating for them and helping them heal, or growing a business, or having that impact, or traveling the world, whatever that is. Freedom and flexibility are priceless, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, obviously, along the way to figuring that out, there were, I'm sure, some challenges and obstacles. What were some of your biggest challenges and obstacles on the way to building that successful life?
My biggest obstacle was me. Right. I'd say my biggest obstacle was massive imposter syndrome, not thinking I was good enough. And so I held myself back from so many different things. One of the first things that I did early on, and some of it was like, I was raised in this super traditional household where my mom didn't work. She was a housewife. She graduated magna cum laude from UC Berkeley. My dad had an AA degree, but yet my mom was not supposed to work. She was the housemaker, right? And my dad went off to work. He kept telling her, well, if you work, taxes will take up all the money. So it was kind of this thing you're raised with, where my mom didn't really know what was going on with the finances, and women don't do that. And I had to really kind of like undo that situation for myself. But I will tell you, for years after I graduated and was going through putting myself through doctoral school and all that, I still didn't really think of the money that I made. I remember my first marriage, my husband thought my money was the fun money. I was making as much as he was as a VP executive of a bank with an MBA. I was making as much as he was, but because I was the woman, it was fun money. So I had to kind of undo a lot of that weird thinking that, your money doesn't really count. You just go, it's what your husband says. Like, kind of blew that all up, let that all go. Maybe too much so, because then in my next marriage, I just made all the money, was the total breadwinner, and like, I was like, oh, wait a minute. Well, this, I think maybe a partnership would be a better way to do this. So some weird stuff around money, and not feeling worthy and not feeling good enough, so that the more I made, the more I just spent. So I never had anything until I kind of went, okay, wait, stop that. Weird stuff around having imposter syndrome of, again, not thinking, who am I to do this? Like, when are they going to figure out I'm not really it and boot me off this TV set, or like, whatever. And it's interesting when I look at, for most people, where they're stopped in their success, because I do a lot of business coaching now for doctors and other healthcare professionals, and where they get in business is never based on what strategies they learn. Like, they generally all come in and they've got great degrees and credentials and education, and how far they go really has to do with their mindset. And every step of the way, you'll hit up against a mindset roadblock. In fact, I had a great mentor early on who said, building a business is the biggest personal development journey you'll ever be on. It's going to bring up all your stuff of, am I good enough? All your weird money stuff that you were raised with, all of it. And so if you really want to be successful, for however success means for you, you got to be willing to look at that stuff and peel that onion and just continue. Every time you get to a certain level, the new stuff shows up. Like, I'm going through some new stuff I just found. And I was like, wow, that's why I'm stuck here. So, it's that willingness to look at your stuff, right?
Yeah, and it's constantly there, even when you get to, those higher levels where you're getting those hit things and whatnot. It's always there. It's an evolution of undoing that unconscious, subconscious stuff that's holding us back. And it's interesting because I also do business coaching, and a lot of times my clients will be doing all the right steps, right? They're taking the right actions, they have the right strategies, and yet it's not mapping out, and it's always tied to some kind of mindset thing.
Yep. But you know what? That is the best news ever when you think about it. Like, because you might think, oh, I don't have that degree, or I'm not good looking enough, or I don't have enough money. But that's never the case. It's not that. It is like when you look at it and go, okay, if it's a mindset issue, how cool is that? Because you can learn that stuff pretty much for free if you really want to, right? I mean, you can get a lot of these books. You can check them out from Amazon Prime, the free thing. So, okay, you paid for Amazon Prime, but you can still turn the books in. So you think about it, you could get an MBA in mindset for not a whole lot of money. You could just watch a bunch of TED Talks and get it, just start watching Brene Brown and Mary Morrissey and Wayne Dyer. So there's all sorts of stuff all over the place. And I think of, my buddy who's at the correctional facility. I've sent him probably 20 books. He has been studying like a crazy person for the last year. I mean, just like and it was funny when the hit piece came out on me. I called him, because he can now talk in prison. And he talked me off the ledge. And I go, this is the greatest gift ever that you, who couldn't forgive and, are now able to turn it around and go, all right, let's look at it this way. And it was like, it was one of the biggest gifts ever. So here's all these things that costs very little for you to put into place that can make an exponential effect, not just on your business, but on your life and on your kids, because I was raised my kids this way too. So that's how my kids were able to get through this horrific accident and, look at it from day one of like, okay, how am I going to help my brother get to be 110%? And my son, when we said you're going to basically, you have our permission to prove every doctor wrong. And he's like, okay, right? So this is one of those things that if you are raising kids, oh my gosh, what a gift to give your kids an amazing, anything is possible mindset, where the only limitations are the limitations in their mind, where there is no ceiling, where they constantly raise the floor, they raise their average. So they will not accept what most people accept as their plight in life, no matter what they're born into, right?
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I love the story of the guy that you're mentoring in the prison, and how he's helping you learn and helping you pivot in that really difficult situation, and how you're also mentoring at home with your kids. And so on that, I wanted to ask you, why is mentorship so important to you?
Mentorship, what's interesting about mentorship is early on in my career, I was a tap dancer. I wanted to go, I actually had a scholarship to college at UCLA as a theater scholarship, and I wanted to be a musical theater actress. So I was a big tap dancer. And I got to a point where my teacher said, all right, I can't teach you anything else. You need to teach. She had me start teaching tap dancing to 5-year-olds. I'm like, are you kidding me? But I learned more teaching tap dancing to 5-year-olds. Like, I improved my skills so much more. And so what's interesting with mentoring is you want it to go both ways. Like, you want to have a mentor who will help you see things differently, who will continue to help you step up and evolve. Like when the hit piece happened, I had my people I called and they're like, all right, so here's what you're going to do. And help coach me through it. But you also want to be a mentor, because that's where you'll really learn. It's, I have my younger son who's 23 is a math genius, literally a math genius. And during quarantine, he wrote 3 papers to be published, but he needed to have a professor publish them. And he outgrew the professors at his school, so he found the guy in the subject that he was enthralled with in South Africa, writes the email, and now the guy's reviewing the papers to help him get them published. And he's just beyond the moon. But alongside of him doing that, he's also been mentoring 3 other kids. So while he's looking for that next mentor to take him, he's also mentoring other kids as well. And I think that's the key thing, is think what the world would be like if you had someone who inspired you, who helped you become a better person, but in turn, you always had someone else you were bringing up too. Think how different things would be out in the world if you were doing that, if that's just who you were. Like I always have in my world that I'm helping mentor a couple other people. And it's not a business relationship. It's it's a it's a humanity relationship, right? It's just part of what we do, that, and I probably get more out of it, truthfully, than they do. And that's one of the things that we don't consider, is quite often where you get the biggest impact in your life is not the things that you got, it's the things that you gave.
Yeah, no, it's so powerful. And right now, a lot of people are between jobs or they have more free time. And I agree, like the ripple effect that we would have in the world if we gave back through mentoring others on, it could be a really simple skill or just uplifting someone that's going through a difficult time, would be tremendous. It would just span so much compassion, so many
Mm-hmm.
new possible ideas would come forward. So I completely agree that that is so powerful. And I love the story about your son finding that mentor in
Oh, I'm
South
so
Africa.
excited. But I also, it's like, if you are in a place right now where just things look really crappy and you're just going, I don't know how the heck I'm going to get through this, and this is awful. The way you can flip that so quickly is to go help someone else. Like if I'm heading into a little mini pity party, like just reach out. I'll reach out and help someone else, because it gets you out of your thing really quickly. You stop focusing on it. You realize that you'd probably trade you wouldn't trade your problem for theirs, so, and you feel a lot better. So and it's a great way to also help shift your mood if you are in a little bit of a pity party. It was one I used when my son was in the hospital. If I started to feel that way, I'd send out a little gratitude text, because it would help flip things around quickly when I texted someone and told them what I appreciated about them or offered to help them.
Yeah, and it also helps you shift your perspective, because oftentimes when we're helping others, it helps us remind ourselves that we're not alone and that other people may have even bigger problems than what we're
Mhm.
facing. And so it gives us that perspective or new viewpoint to view our problems from as well. I love that. So I wanted to ask you, what are some examples of how you give back to future generations or your community?
So one of them has been working with my buddy in the correctional facility. And right now I'm working with another person I met, helping her structure her business, both so that she can be financially free and have her own thing, but also so that it can help a whole lot of people in our Mindshare community. So, it's kind of one of those ones where I'm always on the lookout for someone that I can help and lift up. And I think, gosh, those people are everywhere, right?
Yeah,
They're
I was going to say,
everywhere.
are you having trouble finding them? Because there are a lot of
Uh-uh.
them.
And here's the thing: not everybody wants help, right? Um, and so you got to be careful with that. Everyone wants you to come on in and help them, and not everyone's ready. So, I'm just always open and kind of sniffing around to see who might need a little lift up along the way, because I know that's like Kay Smith gave me my lift up. So I'm always looking for how to repay that. And I've got my own people giving me my lift up too, because you got to take it. It's got to be a give and take, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Otherwise, you get a little burnt out and then you're not able to give as much to the people you're
Right.
mentoring. I wanted to also ask you, for people that are looking for a mentor, what do you think are some of the most important qualities of a good mentor?
I look for someone with super high integrity. I think that is like, I look for someone who's living the life that I admire and respect. So that's the first thing, like super high integrity. For me, I'm really, family is super duper important to me. So like some of the people that are my mentors, I look at how they are with their family, how they are in their relationship. Also, possibly the single most important thing I look for in a mentor is someone who has failed and learned and navigated it with grace. I've had a lot of different mentors and coaches in life. And one of the key, I'd say the number one thing that I've had whenever I've hired a coach, hired a mentor, is that they're where I wanted to be. And they have a lot of integrity. That's non-negotiable. And they've had some pretty big failures, right? Because I know I've learned a lot more from my failures than I ever had from my successes. I see a lot of people that all of a sudden call themselves a business coach because they've done one thing well once, right? And I'm like, okay, one thing well once is fine. And that could have been a lucky accident. When you've done it, succeeded, maybe iterated on it, it failed, got back up, brushed off, did it again, was successful, tried something new, it failed, got back up, right? I mean, if you look at the most successful people in life, they've just succeeded a little more than they failed, but they'll tell you that the failures are where they learned everything. I have not had a day where it was beautiful, it was sunny outside, everything went well. Someone came over and brought me a new pair of shoes. I had a great glass of wine. And I thought at the end of the day, I have grown so much today and become a better person. That is not how it happens, you know? And I always have to remind myself when I'm going through the crap that I will get through it and I will be better on the other side, because it's always true. And that's what I look for. I think about, what some of my mentors Brendan Burchard was my mentor when I wanted to go out and do books and really get my books out into the world. And, he will tell you about his big crash and burns that he had out there between his crash and burn on his book, on an event where he tried to put an event on in a circus tent, just in a complete fail, so those are what I look for, as I told you, Mary Morrissey and her, her husband embezzling. And so you learn way more about someone when you see how they navigate through the challenges than you see how they navigate through the success, right?
Yeah, I think people's true colors come out when they're being faced with a really big challenge, or their life is upside down, or they have that big, public failure. And that's how you learn their integrity, and if it's true, and their capabilities with resilience and how they're going to pivot. And I agree. I know that all of my failures, or I like to call them air quote failures, because I don't really look at them as failures. My opportunities for growth that others in society would call failures were my biggest learning points in time. And I grew so much more from those challenges, even though, well, you said when you're in the midst of it, it feels terrible.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, great. Well, I wanted to move into our lightning round questions to respect your time today, but these are really beautiful stories. What is your favorite book?
Probably The One Thing. Have you read the book?
I love that book.
Okay.
Yes, I quote it all the time.
I feel like I should probably read The One Thing every single day to remind myself to just do the one thing. But I also do a special shout out for these books that Mary Morrissey turned me on to by Wallace D. Wattles. And it's The Science of Being Great and The Science of Being Rich. And you can read a chapter in about 5 minutes, but you could spend an hour on the chapter as well. And it's just, they are the best. I just reread them. I read a chapter every morning. I go through them, then I start over again. They're that good.
I love it. That's great. Yeah. And I think we could all read The One Thing every morning, because there's so many distractions in the world these days. What networking or community group do you love the most?
See, now I wouldn't say there's one I love the most. I love a lot of them for different reasons. I have a group called the Unicorn Club, which is made up of female leaders. And I just love how we support each other through just, the challenges. And then I love our Mindshare group because it's all the health people. And then I love the Mastermind Talks group because they're just awesome humans. But what the common thing they all have is they're all entrepreneurial groups. I really don't have very many people in my life who aren't entrepreneurs, because I think people tend to think we're crazy, and we are. So it's hard. It's like, they just understand, we kind of understand each other and what we're going through more. So those tend to be the majority of my friends I spend time with.
Yeah, and I've had a lot of your Mindshare community members on the podcast. So I have to say you've created a really beautiful community
They
there.
are amazing people. Oh my gosh. I just love that community so much. Like, to have people who are focused to stepping out bigger beyond the walls of their practice and getting information out into the world, especially right now. It's quite something. So they're an incredible group of humans.
They really are. It's been such a pleasure getting to know so many of them. I think one person from that community shared the podcast that I have, and I had so many responses. I was a little overwhelmed. I was like, how many people are in this group that you posted in? I immediately got like 50 people signing up. I'm like, wow, this is great.
Wow,
So,
cool.
yeah, very, very cool. If you could share one message with the world, what would that be?
I had this statement that Kay told me early on that's really kept me going. Is it was like, don't wish it was easier. Make yourself stronger. And it just, in the kind of the counterpoint to that is, we are so much stronger than we think. And so as you're going through these things, it's like, you don't want it to be easier. Use this as an opportunity to step up and realize that you can probably step up way more than you've ever thought possible.
I really like that. It's so easy, like we said earlier, to fall into the victim mode, but I like the challenge of, instead of asking for it to be easier, look at it as an opportunity to be reminded of how strong we are and becoming even stronger. That's amazing. What a lovely quote. And what's the legacy that you wish to leave behind?
So I don't believe in leaving legacies.
Okay.
I think we live legacies.
I like that.
It's a really important distinction that I'm trying to remember. I heard someone talk about living your legacy, and I'm like, that is so critical, because, if we think about what we want to leave behind, why wouldn't we just start that right now? Right. And I'm kind of in a weird straddling point where my thing that I was so focused on was, first, it was to help 1 million people get healthy. That was my first thing. And it was back when I was a personal trainer, and I was helping one person at a time, and then their families would start to get involved. But I was so frustrated because I was like, man, I'm just not making the impact I thought I could make. And how do I help 1 million people get healthy? And the next thing you know, I'm on Dr. Phil for 2 years, audience of 13 million people. So I'm like, okay, got that. Now what? Now, how do I expand from there? And I go, well, if I expand from there, it's really not about what I do. It's about how I can help teach other people to expand their reach out into the world. And collectively, we could reach 1 billion people. And you realize that in order to do that, you've really got to expand beyond the usual audiences. You've got to look at how it becomes much bigger questions around health equality. How do we change the messaging? What do we need to do? So I'm right now really in this exploration phase on that, where it's like, all right, if you're really serious about helping 1 billion people, which is what Mindshare was put there to do, was to help 10,000 doctors and healthcare professionals learn how to expand their reach, increase their impact, so that we could help all these people. But now how do we help people who need to get just the basics, and the way we're communicating is too high level for them to be able to afford and understand? And how do we get back to just, we've got a population that doesn't even know how to cook at this point. I think that was one of the biggest things the pandemic brought up, is people going, okay, I got these staples you told me to get, and I don't know what to do with them. So how do we get back to basics of cooking, eating together, all these simple things that don't cost a lot of money, and a lot of them are free, that can really affect health, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And the education of the basics that we've lost is so key. I know from interviewing a lot of folks from your community, from nutrition to brain health to gut health to just living and, gardening and using the dirt and not being afraid
Yeah,
of getting dirty. So you have
right.
healthy access to good bacteria, right? And these are things that most people don't have any education around in simple terms.
Well, and then you even need to go, okay, well, what about people living in these cities that don't have gardens, and how do we have community gardens? And, I mean, as you start to dig into it, you're like, oh boy, this is, I'm opening this massive, massive thing, but I think that's ours to do. So that's the one I'm currently looking at, is the living the legacy. Is okay, if you want to help 1 billion people, then how do you have to do that through affecting, like making a dent in health equality, because that's where it's showing up.
Yeah, and working within the existing health systems to try to make things work better, which is Pandora's box within itself for sure.
Yes. So a bunch of us health leaders are actually trying to figure out a way to crack that code too. So we will see. Stay tuned. I think if you ask the right questions, when my son was in the hospital, it was like, how do I get my son to 110%? And so if we ask the question, well, how do we create health equality? How do we get people who are in the lower income areas, who have food deserts? How do we do this? How? Right? We'll get the answers.
Yeah, well, I really hope that you guys keep pushing for those answers and don't give up and keep expanding the education to the masses, because we all deserve to have good health. And sadly, a lot of it's just that we don't have the empowerment or the knowledge of how to do that well. And we've been given so much misinformation and misdirected things, and it changes all the time. It's really hard to know what's true anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This has been such a wonderful interview. I know also JJ has been very generous to our audience today. And as a gift for everyone listening, she has what's called 3 free modules for YTB, which is called You the Brand. And this is a course that helps entrepreneurs launch and monetize their brand. And if you're interested in that, you'll see that in the show notes. The link to that is https://mindsharecollaborative.com/you the brand -free trial. That will be in the show notes, so you can have free access to that trial today, as well as a link to her website. JJ, is there anything you'd like to add on that free giveaway?
No, that is actually what here's what I'll tell you about that free giveaway. I joined my first mastermind, and I really wanted to figure out how to do this online business stuff. Right. And it was interesting. I was on Dr. Phil, and I had a website, but it didn't have that little box where you leave your name and your email address. Oops. So I was like, okay, I got to figure this out. And I joined this mastermind, and man, there were so many things thrown at me all at once of, having opt-ins and sending emails and doing programs. And it was completely overwhelming. And for years, I was like, there's got to be a process, a system, like a step 1, a step 2. I could never find it. And I just kept thinking on it. And one night I woke up at 4 a.m. and I outlined the entire thing. So that's what this thing is. It's like, how do you take someone through a process where they know how to start and then what to do all along the way, so that they can move from, idea or one-on-one out to having a leveraged one-to-many business.
I love that. And today, if you have an idea for that, you now have your free step-by-step guide that the expert who's launched 10 businesses or more has already put together for you. So let's take the madness out of it and the overwhelm, and check that out today. I hope you download it and sign up for your free trial. Thank you so much, JJ. It has been such a pleasure.
Thank you. Appreciate being here.
Thank you for joining the show today. I hope you were inspired. More importantly, I hope you take action. What is one thing you can do in this moment that will inspire someone? Without action, nothing changes. Be the change you wish to see in the world. If this show truly inspired you, we ask that you share it through your network. Help us spread the light and inspiration in the world. I look forward to seeing you here next week.